Hello, friends. This is Sid Meier at Firaxis Games. You might be familiar with a game called Civilization. I actually designed that game about 27 years ago. It's been a while since we've had a chance to chat. So how have you been? Thanks. I'm good too. I really never could have imagined back then how the Civilization story would evolve. It's been amazing to watch the growth of the game, the growth of the community, the new ideas that have kind of energized the game, many of them coming from our Civ community. Really, without you, Civ would not have survived all these years. It's been a story of adding new features, of really responding to the needs of our community, the ideas, the suggestions that you provide to us. We made the amazing transition from squares to hexes, added multiplayer play, the internet came along, new systems like religion and espionage, and all the ability to mod the game has kind of added a whole new dimension to it. So it's really, the Civilization story is really one of a game that has evolved over 27 years, but has never kind of lost that core, that kind of one more turn gameplay, the idea that there's always something new just around the corner, whether it's a new technology that you're working on, a new continent to explore, a new leader to make peace with, or not so much. And in terms of these new features, we've got some new things to talk about. There's a new chapter in the Civ 6 story. We invite you to sit back and take a look.
Human advancement knows no boundary. But this has not been without its price. Though we stand at the height of prosperity, we need only look to the past to remember that nature is a power that cannot be ignored. Consuming even the mightiest empires and causing the greatest among us to tremble in her fury. Yet from adversity, the human spirit endures, finding ways to coexist with the earth. Or bend it to our cause. Pursuing a course beyond distant horizons and revealing paths both towards innovation and unintended catastrophe. Our survival necessitates new solutions to old problems. To ensure a future, both for ourselves and generations to come. United in purpose, we must now look beyond borders and welcome the dawn of the next era in human civilization.
Hello, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed your first look at Civilization 6 Gathering Storm, coming February 14th, 2019. So we like you guys so much, we wanted to make sure we went a little above and beyond, you know, chocolates and flowers and all that. So I am Sarah Darney, Marketing Manager at Firaxis Games, and I'm really excited because we want to show you guys a little bit more of the game today. We've got Ed Beach here, franchise lead designer for Civilization 6, and Dennis Shirk, the lead producer. So we're going to talk a little bit about the game first, and then we're actually going to show you guys some first look gameplay. So thank you guys for coming.
Hey, it's a big day. Anytime we can get to the second expansion on a Civilization title, our fan community knows that that's when the game is chock full of brand new features and full to the brim with everything you expect throughout the entire game, and that's the point we're at right now. So we get to start sharing that. It's kind of going to be tricky for us to go through how much has been added in this expansion in the amount of time we have today. So we're going to have to string that out over the next weeks and months to come, but it's great to get that started.
And this is literally overflowing with new stuff. Even going through some of our press interviews over the past few days, we're always talking about something which automatically leads us into something else, and something else we forgot to talk about. It just goes on and on. So there's going to be a lot of information upcoming, and it's super exciting.
All right, so we started with the trailer, the opening cinematic for the game, which I always feel like kind of captures the theme, the mood of the game. So how do you guys feel like that did that? Like, is it capturing all of what's to come?
It absolutely did. And what we did when we first started work on Gathering Storm is we had the idea that the central theme was going to be, let's make the world around you even more part of the game than it ever had been before. In Civilization 6, we've always felt like how you related to the map and how you laid your civilization out on the map was a key part of the gameplay and was going to really drive what you were doing. But we felt like the map wasn't changing, wasn't dynamic, didn't interact with the player enough. And we really wanted to do some things so that all of a sudden you couldn't be sure exactly where everything was landing on the map. Maybe a volcano would erupt, or maybe that river valley that you settled in, that river would actually flood. And so those were kind of the initial things we started working on, and the team really embraced that, and we just started adding more and more features in that direction. So we started thinking, well, we should have some semblance of climate change in here, and so maybe the global temperature is going to rise, and the sea levels will rise, and the polar ice caps will melt. And so we just started down that path, and all of a sudden we had 4 different types of storms in the game, we had droughts in the game, and so the intro video sort of showing that relationship between man and the planet, where sometimes the planet's getting ahead of man, and sometimes man is doing a great job of harnessing the opportunities that they can get from the planet. That's exactly what the theme of the expansion is, and I think the movie did a great job.
And that path was seemingly endless sometimes, because once Ed started going down the path of adding storms, it just spiderwebbed from there, especially by the time he got to climate change, and then the flood barriers had to be added. Things were added all over the place to just make this just big and huge, much to the chagrin of production and the art team. When it's just, we're an iterative gameplay company, and so naturally, when designers have ideas, we're going to try them out.
I mean, because why have one form of renewable energy when you can actually have 5 different sources of renewable energy?
All right. So we're getting all over the place. There's so much to talk about. We've got our environmental effects, #OneMoreCloud. We have our power and the renewable energy. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Okay, so strategic resources have been entirely revamped for Gathering Storm.
Nice.
And so early on with Civ 6, it was just, do you have access to the resource? Now we're doing a lot more accounting. We have to, because we have to keep track of, are you burning coal in your power plants? Are you burning oil? How much of the coal and oil do you have in your stockpile? So we've actually spread that out throughout the strategic resource system. And now all the units in the game are built with exact amounts of strategic resources. Some of the ones later in the game, you're going to have to incur a turn-by-turn maintenance to keep them powered, with your tanks needing fuel to get across the steppes of whatever country you're invading. So, that's kind of a whole new element that's been added in terms of how strategic resources are handled, but it really feeds into, that theme of how you're powering your cities, how they're getting bonuses from being powered, and how that goes along with, driving things like climate change in the game.
All right.
No, I was just going to say it's a great balance. This is another one of those hooks that kind of merged into play. which is that balance between having these resources to fuel your units and needing the resources to fuel your cities, whether you go with cheaper resources like coal and oil, knowing that you're probably going to be endangering the rest of the planet with coastal flooding, et cetera, versus going to cleaner energy. It's a great synergy between all the systems.
So you really can kind of predict what's going to happen with the world around you. You know, it's not just like disasters happen, world floods for no reason.
That's a key thing, and there's a big culture in Firaxis that we've been making civilization games for a long time, and we have to make sure we learn the lessons from previous games. And so, yeah, I was told pretty carefully that going into a random events natural disaster system, you know, was not without some peril. So we thought about that long and hard, and we sort of feel like we have a controlled randomization system for the way the random events are working. So there are things like we have an expected number of times that we expect a volcano to erupt during the game, or expected number of times that we are anticipating that a river is going to flood. And you know, the random events are not purely random. They sort of steer you towards those outcomes. So if a river has never flooded at all in the game, the chance of it flooding is going to build so that it becomes one of the likely events on the next turn. And we also do things like, if the planet is not warming up, then a lot of those events are going to keep at a low level of likelihood. So we're not going to have an increased chance of flooding or hurricanes or whatever until you get to the point where you've burned enough fossil fuels, your planet's warming up, all of a sudden things are starting to go out of control a little bit. But that's something that the players in the game have done to themselves. So there's definitely control over that. And we'll also see right away, as soon as we dive into gameplay, which we're going to do real soon here, that there are all sorts of indicators for the players about the dangers of the spots that they're settling. So you can tell if you're in a floodplain, you can tell if you're near a volcano, you can tell if there are risks of coastal flooding late in the game where you're settling. So you've got the information ahead of time. Some areas are safe, but maybe they're not as ideal in terms of the yields you'll get from them. And so you have to trade off those risks and reward and make the call for yourself when you set up your empire.
So we did touch on this, I think, a little bit, at least the video did for sure. World Congress is coming back, yes?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
World Congress is just a fantastic new system. We're excited about this. We wanted to revisit how World Congress functioned in Civilization 5 and come up with something new that fans will really be able to sink their teeth into. We actually have two different modes of World Congress in the game. One is bringing forward the emergency system that we had in the first expansion and merging it with the World Congress. So if you have something happen to you in the game now, whether it's one of the more traditional emergencies, like your holy city is converted, you get a city taken, a city-state gets annexed, or perhaps you have a situation happen where a flood comes ripping through your territory, causing massive damage, casualties, etc. You're going to have an option to call a special session of the World Congress and have people vote on enacting one of these emergencies. So whether it's a request for aid for yourself, whether it's, you know, he converted my city, it's going to be put before the council. And then the next turn, the World Congress will come up, everybody will vote, and you get to see if that's enacted. Aside from that, we've got a normal session of Congress now, but just a regular World Congress. It happens every 30 turns or so if you're playing at like standard speed. And this just comes up with topical resolutions by the era. And they're not just typical resolutions. So if I'm playing an ancient era game, one of the resolutions that might come up is either it's a luxury resource resolution, for example. And you might either get a chance to say, I want to ban this resource, or I want to promote and double the yields of this resource. And you actually get to choose a target for that as well. So bananas specifically, because I'm a banana heavy civ. So you actually get to get really down into that granularity when you're taking control of a resolution in the World Congress. The difference with all of this, everybody gets one vote for free, but there is a new resource you're using in the game. It's not really a resource, just how I like to refer to it. It's called diplomatic favor. You're earning diplomatic favor by doing things that are great for interactions with the world. So if I have alliances, I'm earning diplomatic favor. If I've got suzerains, I'm earning diplomatic favor. If I'm making a promise to somebody else and I keep it, I'm earning diplomatic favor. And this is an abstract currency that enables me to pump up my vote in the World Congress. So I can turn my one vote into 5 or 6. So as a diplomatic player, if I'm really wanting to control the outcomes of the World Congress, I'm really going to hone in on diplomatic favor to make sure I control that. And of course, all of this eventually leads into a diplomatic victory that is new to this game too.
New victory time. type.
At a certain point later in the game, those are going to start being inserted into World Congress. The ability to vote yourself diplomatic victory points. And that's where having that extra favor really comes into play, because it's not just voting for points. I'm either voting for giving somebody points or taking points away from somebody, and then I choose the target. So controlling that with all this extra favor is a very big deal. And of course, naturally, this wouldn't be World Congress if we didn't add things like I don't want to get into specifics, but like the World's Fair, World Games, climate accords, things like that.
One of the new big ones like that is the disaster relief. So
Yeah.
if somebody does get hit with a disaster, you can actually earn diplomatic victory points just from being the person who really has helped bail them out of that
Yeah.
situation, or you'll at least be able to get a nice large chunk of diplomatic favor out of it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it sounds like we're really kind of like moving towards a future world. You know, we've got this climate change, these rising sea levels, which, you know, is something that a lot of people are concerned about, but it's not necessarily happening completely right now. So tell me more about, you know, what we might see in this future.
Sure, that was one of the first things that we realized when we were really engaging with this whole idea of climate change, is that this hasn't really played out in human history yet. It's something that's going to play out over the next 50 or 100 years. So it really makes sense to extend the timeline of the game further into the future from where we are right now. So we're like, well, that means we actually really need another era in the tech and civic trees. And so in this future era, you know, what's that going to be? How's that going to work? So that's going to be one of the things that we talk about more, you know, several weeks down the line. We'll give all the full details there.
We should tease a little bit, 'cause it's really cool.
Yeah, so there are great things there in terms of how pretty much all the victories have had a significant look at them. So the domination victory, the science victory, and the culture victory, we've said, what would be really cool to add in this sort of near future, you know, era that might extend out to maybe 2050 or so. And so there are tools there that are going to help you curb climate change. There are also tools there that are going to give you that final push towards any of those three victory types.
Nice, nice. All right, I think this might be a good time for us to jump into the game, play a little bit of this. For anyone that, you know, might be joining us for the first time and hasn't seen these pre-release streams, this is an early build of the game. So, you know, we may run into some bugs. It's live, anything can happen. But
and actually,
bear with us.
in terms of that, one thing that we really can't control is the random event system.
That's true.
So
hopefully we get
we
one.
were like, well, it'd be great if we could make sure that, you know, 5 minutes into the live stream a volcano erupted or something like that. But that's actually not the way it works. I mean, it's controlled by the random number generator in the game, and we don't want that system to be too predictable. So like I said, there is some controlled randomness there, so it steers you towards eventually everything's gonna have something happen, but in the next half hour here, we can't be sure what's gonna come up. So I'm crossing my fingers that we'll get some exciting things to show everybody.
So we've got a turn one save that we're going to jump into right now. We are playing as Victoria of England. We're not talking about any of the new leaders just yet. But why Victoria? I know we picked her for a reason.
Okay, so two reasons. One is for the really detail-oriented fans out there, they will notice that this is a different red color for the England Civ than what we had. We had a very dark, sort of blood red color that we were using for them to try to differentiate them from some of the other Civs in the game that had a red and white color scheme. But we have totally changed the way we do Civ colors now. We have what we call a jersey system, so that every Civ in the game has 4 different primary and secondary colors that they can switch between. And so we are now setting things up so every Civ can sort of have the true colors that's maybe right from their flag or right from their coat of arms or whatever. And so that now we've sort of made England into a true, well, that's a great result. We just got a relic out of the first Giddy Hut. The England color has been tweaked, and what happens if you have another red and white Civ in the game, it will just automatically flip to one of the alternate jerseys. So that's a great new feature, and we've been able to do things. I think we might stumble into Australia in this game, or I know that they're in this game. I'm not sure whether we're going to meet them in the gameplay we have now, and people will see that Australia has been switched to a more traditional color scheme for them
I
finally.
think there's a lot of people that are gonna be very happy
so
about
they
that.
were a little too close to Brazil before. You know, both those countries really like the green and yellow, but we now have Australia where it should be.
So you can see where this is going down a pipe when Ed's saying, and Brazil was too close to this one, and this one was too close to that one.
There's a lot of civs in the game.
Right, but
Yeah.
this enabled us to do a lot of things with it, including putting in colorblind modes into the game now, because we've been able to uniformly put a new system in for this. And this is just one of course, this doesn't necessarily have anything to do specifically with Gathering Storm, but as everybody knows who's been with us for a while, whenever we release an expansion, there's always all kinds of updates that trickle out to the rest of the game
And
system.
once you hit 40 civs in the game or so, you're running into problems
Yeah.
with this kind of thing. So the other reason we picked England is because England was such a key driver during the Industrial Revolution. And England actually adopted the nickname for themselves, the Workshop of the World, because they were sort of a trade hub for everything that was going on worldwide in the 19th century. So we have removed the old British Museum civilization trait from England, and we have gone ahead and given them a new Workshop of the World one.
Ooh,
So
right.
here is the screen. We'll leave this up for a few minutes so that everyone
Yeah, they'll
in the
screenshot
online
it. It'll be
community
all
can-
over the
yes,
internet in
can
a second.
exactly, dissect this. But you'll also, the hardcore fans will notice that there are changes embedded also within Victoria's Pax Britannica ability. So England was, got one of the more significant refreshes. We actually, have 4 or 5 civs that
great.
we thought, hey, these guys need to have a tie-in to some of these new features with Gathering Storm. So they're not the only ones that got an update, but we wanted to showcase what we had done for England here.
And of course, I imagine some of our upcoming civs are going to tie into our new features.
Yeah, some of the
Quite
brand
close.
new ones
Okay,
will also,
great.
of course.
So if you wouldn't mind, never mind.
Our first natural disaster. Perfect. On cue.
Carl,
So
you did it.
the Thames River here has flooded, and we can see the Thames River is labeled. And how did that river even get that name? We've never had named rivers in a Civilization 6 game before. So we have a brand new system where we have a database of actual geographical key rivers of the world, as well as key volcanoes of the world, key mountain ranges of the world, deserts, and what have you. And as civs move around the map and discover things, they're going to get the ability to name that geographical feature
That's
the way they like
really
to name
cool.
it. So
Yeah.
obviously that river where we started was kind of the first river that we discovered, and that's going to most likely be the Thames in most of our games. So that's fun. Now if you have a river flooding event and you get a notification about that, it'll name what river it is, so okay, I know where the Thames is. I've been playing all game right next to it, that kind of thing.
So Ed, why would somebody settle beside a river that might flood them?
That's an interesting question, Dennis. Okay, so there are a bunch of things that are different about the way rivers work right now. First of all, floodplains only used to be near deserts. And so it was on desert tiles where a river went through that you got a floodplain before. We've expanded that. Now you have plains, floodplains. Carl can show us some of those right next to his scout. And grasslands floodplains as well. So each river valley, we try to pick a contiguous block of 4 to 10 hexes that are all flatland, and that's considered the flood valley sort of for that river. And all those tiles get marked as floodplain tiles, and then when a river flooding event happens, those are the tiles that are going to be affected. So what's going on there? So even though a tile might be a floodlands plain or floodlands grass tile, that doesn't actually start with any extra fertility over what a normal plains or grassland tile would have. You have to wait for that flooding event to occur for the extra fertility from those floodwaters to arrive on those tiles. And so now we have dynamic yields coming out of the tiles. It will change and build up as the game goes on. So that's actually the reason you want to settle on those floodplains. So actually, Carl might want to do us a favor here and turn on the tile yields along our river valley, and we can see exactly. So for instance, the tile to the southwest of the copper tile has picked up an extra food, and then looks like we've gotten some extra production on the one to the northwest of that. So that's an example. You pick up a couple spots of fertility. We can actually open up our climate screen, which gives us sort of detailed information about what's going on with all the new weather and climate systems. There's an event history tab there that'll allow us to review the floods. And so we can see that the one flood that we've seen was a major flood of the Thames River. It's on the Lemuria continent, which is where we're starting out here. And because we hadn't built anything yet, nothing was damaged, but there's an indicator there that 3 of the tiles picked up fertility, which is like the food and the production that we saw there.
And I'll just add, this is a great example of what this whole environmental game, the environmental effects game that I added, really contributes to the title, because you're not just playing against other players anymore. You're not just playing against other leaders. It's this whole dynamic, living, breathing world that you get to make decisions about. Like when Carl put down his first city, he knows he's putting it beside floodplains, but he's doing it on purpose. He's not, he sees that wide open array and all he sees is potential. Because in history, that yielded potential. Those were the best places for agriculture. There is risk there. You might have to accept that eventually you might get flooded out. So later on, you might want to start researching some possibilities to mitigate some of that risk.
And one thing we should point out that we've got a great example of right now is we're starting near some volcanic spots. You can see that there is a dormant volcano 2 tiles to the east of London. And actually volcanoes can be labeled, so we can show our new labeling system where you can turn those on and off. Oh, that might be a bug. For some reason, we're not getting the volcano labels right now. So the other key thing is the way map generation has been updated. So we have gone through, and we've always had continents as a construct, something that happens within the Civ 6 world, and it might be that you have a big landmass that's actually divided up into multiple smaller continents within it. And it used to be that, you know, that those kind of were divided up the way you would think they would be geographically, but we didn't really have all the plate tectonic type of activity set up quite right where you would expect all your mountain ranges to be where those continental plates have collided. Well, we've updated it, and that's happening now. So you can see that where these 2 continents have come together, that's a very mountainous region. There are a couple new features on the map that I saw. There was a geothermal fissure, which is a new area where we have like bubbling hot springs, and it's a
Do
great.
those have any bad, good effects?
There's a science yield from them right out of the gate.
Nice.
And the hot water that's provided by those will mean that your aqueduct district or your Roman bath district is actually enhanced in terms of the amenities it provides.
I've been to the Blue Lagoon. I know.
There you go. It's also a great place for late game, one of those, you know, the renewable energy sources. So you can actually build a geothermal power plant on that tile. And that's a great way to power your city late in the game.
Have we talked much yet about the different kinds of power and fuel resources and what kind of like how that changes throughout the game?
One thing people might have noticed is one of the abilities that England picked up. We try to make sure that all of our civs have abilities that span as much of the game as we can. Now, England historically really started to shine later in world history, sort of, you know, from the Renaissance on. But we wanted to give them a bonus that made sense also early in the game. So iron and coal resource deposits, England actually gets to have an extra output from those. They get an extra point of iron or coal every turn of the game. So a great strategy here is when you're starting a game as England is look for those iron deposits, and you actually can produce swordsmen faster than anyone else can because each iron deposit on the map is normally producing 2 a turn. So you're basically getting 50% more iron out of those, and that's a great boost to have.
That's really cool.
But then, you know, in terms of where this goes, you'll see, I'm not sure if we'll get to swordsmen in the gameplay here. That's probably a little bit too far. But there is an upfront cost for them, and swordsmen only have an upfront cost. You don't have to, once you built their sword, they're good to go.
Yeah.
But it's some of the later game units where we feel like, you know, to fuel your tanks, you need to have oil per turn. And so there may be both upfront costs and per turn costs for some of the later game units.
So we're in a very deserty region over there with that, what was it, a scout? Yeah. I've noticed that when I'm playing certain events, certain climate events happen in certain regions of the game. How does that work?
Okay, so that's one of the things that we found with while developing everything was that we wanted to start with the flooding and the volcanoes because those were sort of very built into the terrain, and it was events that were happening based on dangerous areas that you have chosen to settle. But the more we played the game, and we've tested it a ton over the last year, we definitely realized that there were parts of the map that were less dangerous, that and also had less opportunities to get at those extra yields. So they were just becoming a little bit less interesting.
Okay.
And so we wanted to spread the environmental effects out across.
More disasters.
That we
Disasters
kept
for
getting that
everyone.
feedback. So we felt like we were hitting on something that people were enjoying. Shaka. All right.
Confirmed.
Yes. So we decided that we needed to come up with things that could affect other areas.
Okay.
And the storm system, initially, we were thinking, well, we're just going to put giant storms like hurricanes that actually do a lot of damage. But then we were like, well, it'd be very interesting to also have dust storms that could arise out of the desert and blizzards that could arrive out of the snow and tundra regions. And then we put, we thought, well, we're missing something that's going to arrive from the grasslands or the plains. And that was why we added tornadoes. So we ended up with 4 different types of storms.
Oh, great.
Did you touch on droughts?
Yep, and that got added as well.
Yes.
And so it's interesting because they all arise from a different sort of biome of the map.
Oh, cool.
And the controlled randomization system that I'm talking about is smart enough to realize, okay, I spawned a blizzard maybe from this snowy region of the map. I will remember that. So the next one that I spawn, I'll pick a different snowy region. So it tends to try to spread them out so that they don't all start in the same place. So by the time you've played through a whole game, you'll get a nice distribution of them. The droughts, it's also similar that it tries to move those around the maps. However, you have to be careful because the droughts are all tied around finding a block of about 6 or 7 contiguous tiles that all are featureless in terms of not having any kind of marsh or rainforest or woods on them.
So don't chop down your forests.
Yeah, so if you clear cut your area, you're going to actually be opening yourself up to being very likely to get hit by a drought.
Interesting. All right.
And then the other big thing that we haven't talked about with the climate system that we really need to be clear is this is entirely at player control at the start of the game.
I was just about to bring that up.
How much of this that you go for. So you were saying, people were testing the game and people were like, more, disasters. Well, that's a setting that you can choose. So we have 5 different settings you choose right at game setup, right on the basic setup screen. And you can choose from a minimal amount of those, which is kind of the direction we think maybe our multiplayer players will head towards.
Right.
All the way up to what we call the hyper real setting, 4 levels above that. And that's the kind of setting where if you're playing on any kind of quick speed, you're getting almost a disaster every single turn.
Woo.
And when you go from the heavy disaster setting up to the hyper real setting, not only are you getting that many disasters, but the hyper real setting tends to try to pick the nastiest versions of the floods or the volcanoes, and it'll inflict those on you.
On a side note, that's my jam. I have it the whole way up all
Chaos.
the time.
Utter chaos.
I enjoy that. I know it's not for everybody, but it's for me.
When we were talking the other day and first, just going over what we were going to talk about on the stream, I had this revelation of how you could use and manipulate the climate system to kind of go against the players that you're playing against and use the world against them. Can you guys just talk more about the strategy and how our very strategic players might be able to have some fun there?
Never condone that play style. It's funny, I saw that go by earlier in the Twitch chat saying, ooh, you can be a bad guy now and ruin everybody on the coast with your environmental
That was my
effects."
first thought.
And I saw that and I was like, yeah, that's correct. Because one of the things we first talked about when Ed was talking about coastal flooding and climate change first came in, I was like, oh, so you could play the bad guy with your inland empire, burn all the coal and oil that you can find, with your sole intention of being the guy that makes sea levels rise and start ruining everybody on the coast that you don't care for. Now, yeah, they have a lot of tools to try to stop you, especially with World Congress and climate accords and things like that would force you to upgrade those power plants. But you could totally do that. That's totally a thing.
And that's one reason that the tornadoes and the droughts were added to affect inland empires, because if you do cause the global temperature to increase. It starts adding a percentage chance. So now, maybe instead of a 30% chance of a storm, you're going to go up to a 40 or 50% chance, just because the climate's more unstable and the atmosphere's got a lot more liquid, and just all those effects you get from climate change. We have not an amazingly super detailed system of this, but we try to make it so that it reflects the current science thinking in terms of what's being driven by the global temperature change. So it's fun to play around with and see how all that interaction occurs.
One of Carl's coworkers back in our fantastic QA department, his name's Albert. I was watching on our internal QA chat channel his slow demise as his coastal nation slowly sunk into the sea. He kept posting screenshots to the channel going, oh man, it's hitting me hard, until it was like the Greek Isles. He only had these little points sticking out there with his cities on it. His districts were underwater. It was the saddest thing I've ever witnessed, but it was a great, it was a great example of the system when you ignore the system entirely, ignore climate change entirely, and watch everything on the coast just start to sink, and the sea ice is all fading away. New passages open up, but your city's underwater. It's a great bit of storytelling that's added to the game that's not just dictated by the other players.
Ooh, we've got our second city now. Can we zoom in on that real quick? And I should take a second to introduce Carl, who is playing for us over here. He is our lead QA tester for the game, and he is a Civ guru and actually taught me a ton about playing when I first started here at Firaxis.
And he's also defeated me in some of the live stream multiplayer games.
So Carl plays this as a full-time job every day, and then he goes home and he's like, what do I want to do? I'm going to play Civ 6. And he goes home and he plays it for enjoyment when he gets home too. So yeah, we no longer have any kind of challenge streams where we're like, ooh, we should have Ed play somebody from QA because Ed will lose.
Yeah.
And that's
never a good idea.
Outback Tycoon.
Outback Tycoon.
But otherwise, that's
where we'll hang our hat.
Yeah. So wait a second. This second city that we founded looks a lot different than it used to.
It's a very interesting looking
And the fact that it's a coastal city, it looks like I can dock a ship there now. So I think we are giving a shout out to the fact that coastal cities have played an integral role throughout all of our games.
They have.
The other interesting thing is we just met China. After the Zulu, we met China, and the civs that have been put into this game as the ones that we're going to bump into have actually been carefully selected as some of the civs that have gotten bonuses.
Okay.
Related to new systems that were added for Gathering Storm. So China has received an update, and it is somehow related to that graphic that we were looking at in the city.
Ooh.
So we'll leave it at that.
All right. Excellent. So what is the feature that you were most excited, not about like coming up with or designing or anything, but what's like the most fun for you to play?
I actually love some of the new civs, and so I know we're not talking about this today, so I'll have to control my excitement. I also love some of the things that we're doing for the new victories. So I'm really excited that we're going to get to go there. But in terms of things that we can show off here, I'm just a huge geography nerd. I'll absolutely own that. And so the fact that we now are naming things on the map, that the labeling is there so you can turn on and off labels and decide whatever you want to do in terms of making your world look like it's a map, making a world look like it's a Civ world. That's all possible now. I actually love the game of starting out in the first 10 or 20 turns of exploration, and I run across a geographical feature that my explorer didn't name, that the name was already there. And I'm trying to decipher, based on my reasonably good but not excellent knowledge of world geography, does that give me a hint as to what Civ I'm about to bump into or not? So we feel like players, as they play with Gathering Storm, are going to get really, really good for their bar trivia leagues. And, if you're playing in that kind of thing and you love geography trivia games or whatever like that, Gathering Storm is definitely going to help you. We also know that the mod community is going to go nuts with this because we have a database of like several hundred world rivers, and so we might have, 2 or 3, maybe 4 for some of our civilizations. But if they want to go nuts with populating that with all possible major rivers for each of the civilizations, I can definitely do that as well.
I've got 2 favorite features. One of them is normal, one of them is a bit warped. The one that I think is relatively normal is just something that I missed from before. When somebody slights me, because I'm not typically a domination player, when I get slighted, my religious city gets taken over, or etc. I love special sessions of Congress because it gives me a knob to turn to try to get revenge, but in a slightly different way. And the revenge in this case is delivered by the whole community. So if an emergency actually gets passed and I put it through.
We've got another river flood here.
Wow.
And I spend enough favor, the hammer's just going to drop on him by everybody in the game. That's cool. I really like that.
Let's go to that river flood real quick, Carl, because you can see that the city itself took damage.
Oh, yeah.
So we should talk about all the different types of damage that you
And
can
his
take.
scout did too.
Yeah. So when a river floods, a volcano goes off, a storm goes through, yes, there's the possibility of gaining fertility like we were talking about before, but your improvements could be either pillaged or destroyed. Your districts can have any of the buildings in those pillaged, including the whole district being pillaged from those events. Your walls can take damage in your city.
Wow.
Your city garrison can take damage, like we saw right here. Civilian units can be wiped out entirely. We don't usually track hit points for civilian units, so if we decide to take damage there, they get wiped out entirely. Or a unit like the scout here can take points of damage, and typically they're not going to be killed. A military won't be killed unless it's already damaged, but if you're moving one of your already heavily damaged units through a natural disaster, they can be taken out. So we can go to the climate log again, and we can see that for events where there are damaged in the event history, or actually, yeah, right there on the front screen, we can see 2 tiles were damaged and 1 unit was killed.
Which leads me
with
into
the
my
little
second
indicators at the bottom of that
favorite
bubble.
thing. This was shortly after Ed actually got volcanoes into the game. Once a volcano is active, generally you don't want to, be too near it because it has a higher percentage chance of actually erupting. And I was playing a religious game, sending my missionaries traipsing across my continent to another continent, so I'd kind of order them and forget it. And the first one never arrived. I had no idea why. I sent another one, and that one didn't arrive. So I sent military over thinking that, maybe barbarians or something had sniped them. But when I went back through my logs, I saw that a volcano erupted 2 times exactly while they were walking by it.
Because you're playing on chaos mode.
Yes,
Yes.
crisping my missionaries on their way. And so I decided to go a slightly different route to the other continent instead of through this nice mountain pass that I was going through. But I thought that was brilliant and awesome in a bad way, of course, because I'm losing guys, but I still thought it just added yet more story elements to the game I was playing.
That is one of my favorite things, especially about when we added the timeline in Rise and Fall, is just seeing the story of the game unfold. And I feel like this adds a really incredibly cool aspect that just we haven't touched on before.
Right. That's kind of the really nice opportunity we have with Civilization 6 is we had so many, wow, we got a 3rd flood.
Just moderate.
Yeah. So because we had so many of the sort of core features in our base game, and then once we'd added Rise and Fall, we were really starting to flesh everything out. We knew we wanted to add the World Congress as sort of the final piece of sort of the expected pieces, but we knew with this expansion that we could go in a brand new direction. I mean, Sid talked about in his video about how it's a new chapter for the series.
Yeah.
And I really do feel that way because,
like it.
the game world just feels different right now. It feels more like it's a player in the world that's it's partially an opponent, but partially a friendly assistant that can help you in your way. So it just makes the whole world feel more alive, and I think it's a really interesting way for us to have taken the series.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that the opening cinematic captured really well too. That 2 sides to the coin feeling there. I know we've got a couple new people that have shown up in chat who look a little bit scared of all the flooding and people dying and the amount of power that the world now has. So I do want to remind for the new people that are here that this isn't just random. There are good things that happen when you have flooding. We get the fertility.
That actually happens with most of the disasters.
Yeah.
Whether it's, a storm that comes through like a hurricane, a volcano erupting, everybody knows that, not everybody knows, we do now. Everybody in our building now knows, because of Ed, that volcanic soil is actually some of the most fertile soil in the world. So even when a volcano erupts, if you take damage, it is short-lived damage. You're going to rebuild, you're going to repair, and those things will now be even stronger and yield more results. So it's part of your strategic thinking, where you place your cities, what you build next to these risky locations. You want them to be simple enough that you can repair them. Like if you're building improvements next to them, that's much easier. You walk a builder over and you just do the typical repair that you would normally do, and now it's stronger. However, if you decide to make an evil layer of a scientific district between 3 different volcanoes, you're going to be doing a lot of repairing, but it's still an awesome
Still
place
a really good
for a
district.
campus.
Yeah.
So it's a trade-off, and it's a whole level of thinking now when you're playing versus the environment, because you want to put cities down, obviously, in strong places, but you have to take some of these other things into account, and that's just amazing.
I thought it was fascinating when I started looking into all this that we obviously took a lot of inspiration from what happened at Pompeii as one of our best historical examples of what we wanted this system to feel like. And the more I started looking at it, I was like, there are still hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that live within 10 miles of that volcano, and that volcano is still active. But it is such a fertile breadbasket region for Italy that they can't not settle that area and farm that area, because the risk of disaster just doesn't happen that often. So they might as well enjoy those hundreds of years where they're safe and everything's good. And we actually had an interview with an Italian journalist yesterday, and we were describing all this to him. He's like, yes, those people are crazy, but yet they still live under the shadow of historically famous volcanoes.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does all this play into some of the things that we added in Rise and Fall? Are there some interesting synergy there?
Okay, so we can open up the historic timeline, and Carl can show us that the very first thing he did in the game was settling the city of London. That was a brand new historic event, because the citizens of London adjust to their new home and keep a wary eye on the nearby river. So that is, your interaction with the planet, what you're doing with these volcanoes and the floodplains, that's noticed by the historic moment system. So that is absolutely something that players will get rewarded for taking some of those risks. And so we've updated the game with quite a few new historic moments, the new bringing power online, empowering your cities, all those kind of things, some of the late game things that we've added. Those are all reflected in the historic moment system. Now, Carl briefly opened the governor screen, and we can go back to that. And people are going to love looking at this once we open up. Why don't we pick 1 or 2 of these governors? You can certainly, players who know this well will see that some of the bonuses have moved around between the governors. And so let's go ahead and take the 2 that Carl has already promoted, and we'll show that we have some brand new promotions for them. And this is something we'll get into more with some of the other live streams, but for now we'll just let people know that this is one of the areas of Rise and Fall that we knew we had to rework it for a couple reasons. The strategic resource system being different was one of those. And so we went ahead and we did that. But we said at this point in time, we're moving enough things around. Let's look at all the governors. Let's rebalance them. Let's try to make all of them really appealing to players, depending on what you're doing in the game.
Right.
All right, back to gameplay.
Now, how about emergencies? I know you'd mentioned a little bit with the disaster emergencies and how that kind of fits into World Congress.
Yeah, it's through the special session mechanic that Dennis was talking about. But one thing people will note here, there's a new item up on the top toolbar, right to the right of the tourism icon. That's the diplomatic favor currency that is tracking. You don't normally get that early in the game. You have to get into one of the classical era governments or become suzerain of a city-state to start earning that per turn. But it's very cool what that does for you. It's not something that you only need if you're going for the diplomatic victory, because there are a lot of powerful things you can do with the World Congress if you have enough favor to get things, all the votes to come out the way you want them to. And one of the really cool things you can do is be the expected target of an emergency, but block the world from actually putting that emergency into play.
Oh.
Yes, that is fantastic, because the AI obviously can call special sessions as well. So if you're wronging them, if you've played your cards right and you're preparing for this epic takeover of the world, you would have been masquerading as the friendly guy the entire game and banking all of that favor for this moment when you do your big invasion, and you can actually stop people from calling emergencies because you have all of that favor banked. So converting cities, taking city-states, you can just nope. When they're saying, this is an emergency, we need to take this back, you add all your favor, and block it from happening. So
It looks like
very
Chin already
fantastic
has
moment.
racked up some favor in this game, and he just offered to trade some of it to Carl. So
Oh, wow.
that's another example.
trade favor, too.
You can trade favor. All the new strategic resources, with them being itemized at a much more granular level than they were before. Those are great things to be trading. So the trading table is a lot more active than it was, or at least there are a lot more sort of ways to go with what you're doing with the trading table.
Throughout this stream, Dennis, you have mentioned certain things that make me very nervous about ever playing against you again. I've never seen this side of you until this expansion.
See, I'm a builder, not a fighter. See, I had to play on words there. I like to build the big empire. I like to get along with everybody. And yeah, whenever I'd play, unnamed games in the past, I would always be the paladin, and I'm one of those people that plays the good guys. So if emergencies are called for somebody who slights somebody else, I'm probably going to help take that back. The environmental disasters enable me to get a little bit of that pressure release out in terms of adding some chaos to my game, but still being the good guy, because it's the environment, and I can actually game that system to watch how things happen and how I can improve the yields that I might already be getting in my cities, to make my cities better by managing that environment.
And Carl, go ahead and bring that government screen up again, but don't scroll it anywhere. You can see that off to the right of communism, fascism, democracy, we have a third tier of government that we're sort of teasing there nicely.
You big tease.
So those are brand new governments that unlock in the new...
The new era.
Yeah, actually, I think they unlock just before the new era, or it's right on the cusp there of that new era, so that you get a chance to actually really embrace new ways of setting up societies and governing people late in the game.
So you guys got to play a little bit with like potential future fiction there. That's something that we don't typically...
and one thing we have talked about, I can reveal this much about the future era, is that part of the tech tree is something where we didn't actually have any historical information about how these things are going to unlock over the next 50 years.
Right.
We don't know which things sort of is really a prerequisite for getting to that next big, exciting innovation. So we decided that the actual great way, this is something that Anton came up with that was just, I thought, brilliant, was he went ahead and said, what if we make that part of the technology and civics tree randomized? And let's not lay out everything exactly the same way every time. And so you know that there are nodes out there, you know that they will give you things that are important to winning your game, but you don't know exactly which ones are where, and you actually sort of have to explore into that part of the tree by getting up and researching things that are just directly adjacent to the unknown ones. And then all of a sudden that part of the tree becomes known to you, and then you can figure out where to go.
I like that.
So it's very cool and very fun.
Oh, it's because we can't predict the future. So
It's true.
I like that. That's a really, really interesting mechanic. And that and the events that are happening, all of this is, I just see replay in my head happening over and over again. And like every game just is going to feel so different. And I'm very excited.
Plus, anytime you get to this sort of critical mass where you have 40 different civilizations in the game,
That's true too.
and they all have different agendas. We actually haven't talked a lot about the diplomacy changes that are coming. We'll talk about that more in some of the streams, but kind of some of the two big highlights are we definitely took a hard look at the warmongering system, and there's some brand new things there. And then we looked at the agenda system as well, and we thought that given how long the game now spans in terms of how many eras you go through, that'd be interesting to do something with agendas late in the game. So we have something cooked up there as well.
Interesting.
Carl, we have multiple people on the Twitch stream which are very concerned that your worker is still asleep and you haven't improved the wheat.
We also finally got our label on our volcano.
Yes.
Maybe it was because we were in the lens view, but now you can see it. We can zoom in on our volcano, which is still sadly dormant. I would have liked that guy to perk up and do something for us, but such is life with a random event system. That sometimes that's kind of a fun trade-off. You go to a new settlement location and you see the volcano's dormant and you say, well, okay, I'll just start building everything next to it. And then all of a sudden the volcano wakes up and you're like, oh, well, maybe that campus isn't so safe anymore, that holy site that has a great adjacency bonus, but maybe it's not a great place to have it anymore.
We don't have too much time left, but was there anything that you guys thought of that you might want to just talk about a little bit more?
I don't know. We have to save some stuff for later.
That's true.
There's a lot to talk about. I will say that something we've barely touched on that would be cool, especially with Carl's current location with London, is as soon as he can get to dams, that's going to make that area pretty effective. Because once he builds the dam, it stops the damage from flooding, but does not stop the fertility increases from that river still being the breadbasket of his little valley here. So
the dam is
very
it's a brand new
beneficial.
district.
Yeah.
It unlocks late in the classical era. And once you've put that in place, you basically have established a reservoir along that river, and the graphics do reflect that, which is really cool. But now you've got this steady supply of fresh water for your city. So it's going to increase your housing capability. And it's also, like Dennis says, it's going to give you that buffer. When the floodwaters come down the river, the first thing they'll do is fill up that reservoir. You'll be able to control how much spills down beyond the dam. And so it's the way in real life we control flooding along rivers. So that's what we're doing in the game.
You can improve it later with a hydroelectric power plant too.
Right, yet another one of our renewable energy sources. I think the other thing that I want to mention before we sign off is we just had a great time with some of the things that we could do to tie in Gathering Storm with some of our older civilizations. So I hinted that there's something to do with China. We've shown how England is boosted by the Industrial Revolution. But my favorite effect is with Russia.
Oh,
And so
yes.
since we added blizzards to the game, we just were sitting around the table at the end of a meeting one day and we're like, why haven't we done this? We have to do this. So there is a Russia special ability in regard to blizzards. So basically, if a blizzard damages units, which it certainly can do, just like we saw the scout get damaged before, you know, that's a bad thing. But in Russian territory, enemy forces are very susceptible to blizzard damage, and Russian forces are immune to it. And it wasn't a big thing to add, but it just had that right flavor that we felt like was, you know, such a cool little nod out to some of those historical winter campaigns in Russia.
It's live. Anything can happen.
Yes.
Are there any other civs that kind of can respond to the environmental effects in that way?
I think that's one of the key ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I dig it. It seems like a lot of people are very excited. So that makes me excited, and I know you guys are. We'll let Carl play for a couple more minutes. I'm keeping an eye on chat, trying to get a couple of questions from our fans. So if you guys do have questions, please post them in here, and we will try to get to you. Oh, so who's he building here? I haven't been.
It looks like it's the Oracle, I think.
Yep.
And so, you know, players may have noticed that this is our normal camera that we have for when you complete wonders. It's also the camera that we have in game when you discover through exploration a natural wonder. And we've used that similar type of camera shot for whenever a disaster is going off sort of directly in your empire. We have the climate screen that's sort of your way of reviewing all the activity that's going on with that natural disaster system. But you're also getting plenty of notifications if things are happening, you know, 6-10 tiles away. You'll get notifications of that if it's some place that you've explored. And that's also actually super useful in terms of planning out where you might be expanding your empire. If you know that that river nearby has flooded 2 or 3 times already, you know that that's going to be an extra fertile area that's already seen those floodplains get boosted several times in fertility. And, you know, that's right where you want to go ahead and beeline with a settler to grab that terrain.
Can wonders be affected by natural disasters?
Wonders cannot. So there
Too
are
wondrous.
Yeah.
I also saw someone picked out build queue in here.
Oh, a very good spot.
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll go through how the build queue works. But there are a number of sort of quality of life things that we wanted to get into Civilization 6 all along. So the build queue was definitely trickier in this game than in any other because we have district placement and wonder placement and the whole hex selection. Now we have resources. You have to make sure you have enough resources to build a unit. So we had to very carefully get everything set up to get build queue in, but it is in now and it's great. We even have a sort of a master screen so you can see all the build queues for all of your cities at the same time. And I find that late in the game, you know, I'm bringing that screen up a lot because I might be queuing things 2 or 3 items deep across my 8 or 10 cities, and all of a sudden you get a really good look at exactly what's going on with production in your game. So we want to show that feature, but we want to actually give it enough time that we can sort of dedicate one of our upcoming live streams to that.
And that's another thing that's just going to be released along with the expansion to all the versions of the game. Obviously, with expansion work comes a lot of base work, so we're always doing tweaks, improvements, AI improvements, the whole 9 yards. So we want to make sure that everybody gets something out of this when it releases and makes the game enjoyable, whether you're playing Gathering Storm or not. Of course, it'll be more enjoyable if you're playing Gathering Storm.
Likewise, I think we can at least mention that the Hall of Fame is in this as well. And that's something else that's going out to all versions of the game. So, you know, again, another quality of life, fun thing that people have been looking for, and we wanted to do it right. So we'll demonstrate that at some point in the future as well.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah, I'm very excited. I know that the fans are looking forward to this. We've got a lot of people very hype about volcanoes, build queues, some other things that we're going to be talking about soon. So I think that that pretty much does it for today. But we are going to be doing these live streams going forward and continuing this and revealing new things, showing gameplay as we update everything, and introducing some new civs. So do you guys have any exciting things coming up that you're really stoked to talk about?
The new civs.
Any favorites?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good.
Many new favorites.
Yes.
Good. Awesome.
And it's not just, I mean, I love the choices we've made. We've got some new ones they're brand new to the series, so that's always exciting. But I love the
Old
way
favorites, of
we have old
course.
favorites, of course, as well. But just the way the gameplay revolves around each one of them, I feel any of them I'm good to play right now because they all have that unique feel that you know, really gets me excited to play them.
Great. All right. Thank you again to everyone that tuned in today and got the first look at Gathering Storm. Stick with us. We're going to be doing live streams and showing screenshots, revealing leaders, new content, all this fun stuff over the next couple of months until our release on February 14th, 2019. So thank you guys again and have a good one.